November 12, 1995. Cleveland, Ohio. The scent permeating the hospital room was that of antiseptic and dying flowers, the kind of odor that remains etched in memory regardless of how much time has elapsed, the kind that signifies someone you love is running out of moments. Greta Anderson occupied the bed near the window, her breathing shallow, her skin translucent against the afternoon light. 78 years old. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The physicians had given her 3 weeks, perhaps 4 if she was fortunate. Fortunate, that was an peculiar word for what was approaching. Her 3 children sat encircling the bed. Margaret, 52, the eldest. Thomas, 49, the middle child. And Catherine, 46, the baby, dark-haired and blue-eyed, all of them inheriting their father's coloring, all of them successful, married with children of their own, all of them gathering to bid farewell to the woman who'd raised them in that modest house on Maple Street, who'd prepared breakfast for them every morning for 18 years, who'd instructed them in becoming good Americans. All of them about to discover that everything they understood about their mother was a fabrication. Margaret held her mother's left hand. The 4-line tape to its back had left bruises, purple and yellow spreading like watercolors beneath the skin. "Mom, you don't need to talk," Margaret said softly. "Just rest. We're here." Greta's eyes opened, still sharp, still blue, still possessing that quality they'd had for 50 years. "No," her voice emerged as barely a whisper, ravaged by the morphine and the disease consuming her from within. "I need to tell you something before I die. Something I have never shared with anyone." Thomas leaned forward. "Mom, whatever it is, we're listening." Greta's grip tightened on Margaret's hand, stronger than it had been in days. "All of you. Because after I'm gone, you need to understand why I was the way I was. Why I never discussed Germany. Why I never returned." Catherine exchanged glances with her siblings. Their mother never spoke about Germany, never mentioned the war, never discussed her life before meeting their father. They'd learned not to inquire. Some things their father had told them were too painful to revisit. "Why I could never sleep through the night," Greta continued. "Why I checked the locks 3 times every evening. Why I kept that box in the attic that you made me promise never to open." Margaret's breath caught. The box. They all knew about the box, a small wooden chest with a padlock that their mother kept in the far corner of the attic, behind the Christmas decorations and the old photo albums. She'd made them swear when they were children that they would never open it, that they would burn it upon her death, unopened. "Mom, you don't need to," Thomas started. "Yes, I do." A tear slid down Greta's cheek, the first tear her children had witnessed her cry in decades. "Because what's in that box, what I did in 1946, it's been killing me for 50 years. And I need you to know. Even if you hate me for it. Even if you never forgive me. You need to know the truth. Who your mother really was." The room fell silent. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, someone else's emergency, someone else's crisis. But in this room, at this moment, the only sounds were Greta Anderson's labored breathing and the beeping of the heart monitor counting down her final days. In the summer of 1946, Greta whispered, "I was a prisoner of war at a camp in Virginia. And something happened there. Something I did. And I've been living with it ever since." She closed her eyes, drew a breath, and began to tell them. And nothing would ever be the same again. Let me take you back. To understand what Greta was about to confess, you have to understand where it started. June 1946. Camp Perry, Virginia. The POW camp was a scar on the landscape in the humid Virginia countryside, rows of wooden barracks enclosed by barbed wire fences, guard towers at each corner, American flags snapping in the heavy summer breeze. Inside the wire, there were 347 German prisoners of war waiting to go home. Most of them were men, Wehrmacht soldiers captured in France or Italy, awaiting paperwork processing, awaiting ships to transport them back to a Germany that no longer existed in the form they remembered. But there were women too, 23 of them in a separate section of the camp. Women who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time as the war concluded, nurses from field hospitals, telegraph operators, cooks, administrative staff, women who'd worn German uniforms and were now paying the price for being on the losing side. One of them was Greta Zimmermann. At the time, she was 28 years old, tall, blonde, blue-eyed, the kind of woman the right had once termed perfect Aryan stock, though she'd despised that phrase even when uttering it could have gotten her killed. She'd been a telegraph operator in a Wehrmacht communications unit based in France when the Allies broke through. She hadn't fired a weapon, hadn't harmed anyone, had merely sent and received coded messages she didn't understand, sitting in a bunker while the world exploded around her. In August 1944, when the Americans stormed their position, she'd surrendered along with the rest of her unit. She'd spent 2 years in various camps, first in France, then England, then they'd sent her to America in early 1946, and she'd never fully comprehended why. Now she was here, waiting, hoping, trying to determine what remained of her life. Because there was nothing to return to. Her parents were dead, killed in a bombing raid by the Allies on Dresden in February 1945, along with her younger sister. The letters from the Red Cross had been very clear on that, very detailed. The apartment building where she'd grown up had taken a direct hit. There were no remains to bury, only names on a roll of the disappeared and deceased. Her older brother Hans was somewhere in a Soviet POW camp in Siberia. If he was still alive, the Red Cross couldn't say for certain either. Her fiancé Frederick had died at Stalingrad in 1943. She still possessed his final letter, written 3 days before he froze to death in a Russian winter. It was all over. Everything she'd known, her country, her family, her future. So when the Americans offered her a choice, return to the ruins of Germany or stay in America and apply for resettlement, she barely hesitated. Stay. Start over. Become someone new. But first, she had to wait. The paperwork took time. The interviews took longer. There were questions about her service, about her beliefs, about whether she'd been a member of the Nazi Party. She hadn't. Her father had forbidden it. Under all this pressure, we are Germans, he'd said, not Nazis. It was one of the final things he'd said to her before she departed for France in 1943. So she sat and waited at Camp Perry, in the women's section, sleeping in a bunk bed in a barracks she shared with 11 other German women, all of them ghosts of the people they'd been before the war. And that's where she met Anna. Anna Müller. 34 years old. A nurse from Munich, short and dark-haired, with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. Captured in Italy in 1944 while working in a field hospital as the Allies broke through. Anna had become Greta's closest friend in the camp, the person she talked to during the long, empty days, the person who understood what it was like to lose everything and still be trying to figure out how to keep living anyway. They discussed trivial matters, the food, the weather, the other women in the barracks. They didn't discuss the war. That was an unspoken rule. The war was over, talking about it only amplified the volume of the ghosts. But on June 17, 1946, Anna broke the rule. It was a Tuesday, hot and humid, the sort of Virginia summer day that made you feel like you were breathing water. Greta and Anna were sitting in the shade behind their barracks during the afternoon recreation period, watching the other women play cards, write letters, or sit in the sun trying to remember what freedom felt like. "Can I tell you something?" Anna said quietly. Greta looked at her. Anna's face was pale. She'd been ill for a few days with some sort of stomach bug circulating through the camp, but this looked different. This looked like fear. "Of course," Greta said. Anna was silent for a long moment. "Then, I did something during the war. Something terrible. And I don't know if I can live with it anymore." Greta's stomach tightened. She was no stranger to confessions in the camps. Late at night, women shared their secrets with each other, the things they'd done to survive, the things they'd witnessed, the things they wished they could forget. "You don't have to tell me," Greta said. "I think I do." Anna stared at her hands. "Because if I don't tell someone, I believe I will lose my mind." She took a breath. "In 1944, I was at a military hospital in northern Italy. We were treating wounded soldiers, German soldiers. Our boys. They were dying faster than we could save them. Infections, mostly. We didn't have enough antibiotics. Nothing was getting through." Greta nodded. She'd heard similar stories. The end of the war had been chaos, supply lines cut, resources depleted, men dying from wounds that should have been treatable. "There was a doctor at the hospital," Anna continued. "Dr. Klaus Richter. He was experimenting, trying to discover new treatments, new ways to fight infection." Anna's voice dropped to a whisper. "He was using prisoners. Soviet prisoners of war. Testing treatments on them without their consent. Intentionally infecting them to see what worked and what didn't. Most of them died." Greta felt cold despite the heat. "I knew," Anna said. "I knew what he was doing. I saw the isolation ward. I saw the prisoners. I saw their charts. I saw what he was doing to them. And I didn't say anything. I didn't stop him. I just looked the other way. Anna, I told myself it was for the greater good. That if we could save German soldiers, it was worth it. That the prisoners were going to die anyway. All the lies we told ourselves during the war." Anna's voice fractured. "But they weren't going to die anyway. We killed them. I helped kill them. Maybe 30 men. Maybe 40. I don't even know how many exactly. And now I have to live with that." She looked at Greta, tears streaming down her face. "How do I live with that?" Greta had no words. Nothing that would improve the situation, no absolution that mattered. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the camp surrounding them, women laughing, guards talking, the ordinary noises of a prison that had made itself into something softer. Then Anna said, "The Americans don't know." "About what Dr. Richter did?" "About the experiments. When we left the hospital, we destroyed the records. The prisoners, they are all dead now. There's no evidence. No other witnesses besides the medical personnel, and most of them are dead too. Killed during the final weeks of the war." She looked at Greta. "I could go home. Start over. Never tell anyone. And no one would ever know what I did. Is that what you're going to do?" Greta asked quietly. "I don't know," Anna said. Part of me thinks I need to tell someone. Confess. Face punishment. But the other part of me thinks, what would that accomplish? It won't bring those men back. It won't undo what happened. It will just destroy whatever life I have left. She wiped her eyes. What would you do, Greta? If you were me? Would you tell? Or would you stay silent and try to forget? And that was the question. The question Greta Anderson would carry for the next 50 years. She didn't answer right away. She thought about it, truly thought about it. What would she do? Would she condemn herself, or would she spare herself and bear that burden for the rest of her life? You have to do what you can live with, Greta said finally. Whatever lets you sleep at night. It wasn't an answer. It was an evasion. But Anna nodded as if it were enough. They never spoke of it again. Anna was dead a day later. The official report stated suicide. Anna Muller had hanged herself on the night of June 20, 1946, in the barracks bathroom. Her body was discovered by one of the other women at 6 in the morning. The camp commander expressed sympathy. It would be investigated, but these things happened occasionally. The psychological impact of the war, the uncertainty of the future, the general depression among prisoners. They buried her in the small cemetery outside the camp, a wooden cross with her name and dates, a few prayers in German. Most of the women from the barracks attended. Greta stood at the back and watched them lower Anna into the ground. And as she watched, Anna's question echoed in her mind, would you tell, or would you stay silent? Anna had chosen silence. Permanent, final silence. And Greta thought that would be the end of it. But 3 weeks later, on July 10, 1946, an American investigator arrived at the camp. His name was Captain James Morrison, War Crimes Investigation Unit, U.S. Army. He was investigating reports of medical experiments on Soviet prisoners of war conducted at a German military hospital in northern Italy in 1944. Someone had talked. Not Anna. Anna was dead. But someone else from that hospital, someone who'd survived, someone who'd given the Americans enough information to start asking questions. And the Americans were skilled questioners. Captain Morrison interviewed everyone who'd been at that hospital, the surviving doctors, the nurses, the support staff. One by one, he summoned them into a small office in the administration building and asked what they knew. Greta wasn't on his list. She'd never been at that hospital. She'd been in France throughout the war. But Anna had told her. Anna had confessed. And Greta knew what Captain Morrison didn't. She knew about Dr. Richter's experiments. She knew about the prisoners. She knew that Anna had been complicit, had known what was happening and done nothing. She knew the truth. And Captain Morrison needed that truth. The dilemma was whether to tell him. This is where the story becomes complicated, where simple narratives break down, where there is no good choice, only different varieties of bad. Greta wrestled with it for days. Barely slept. Barely ate. The other women in her barracks noticed and asked if she was all right. She said she was fine, just tired, just anxious about the resettlement process. But in truth, she was grappling with an impossible decision. If she spoke, she would be helping to bring a war criminal to justice. Dr. Richter was still out there somewhere, probably in hiding, probably under another name. The Americans might find him if they knew what he'd done. They could prosecute him. They could ensure he faced consequences for what he'd done to those Soviet prisoners. Justice. That's what people argued for. but if she spoke, she would also be implicating Anna. Anna couldn't defend herself, she was dead. Anna had been Greta's friend. Anna had already punished herself in the worst possible way. If Greta told Captain Morrison, Anna's name would be dragged through the mud. Her family in Munich, if they were still alive, would learn what she'd done. Her memory would be destroyed. And for what? Anna was dead. She couldn't face trial. She couldn't be punished any more than she'd already punished herself. So what purpose would telling serve? To tarnish the reputation of a dead woman? Greta went back and forth. Back and forth. Tell the truth. Do the right thing. Help bring a war criminal to justice. Or protect her friend. Preserve the memory of the woman who'd trusted her with her darkest secret.